Okay, so we are reading really my favorite scene in this entire play today. So this is Act 3, Scene 2. This is actually the pivotal scene where everything changes. Do you remember last year when you read Romeo and Juliet? It's in Act 3 that we have Mercutio and Benvolio. They're like, walking around town, and, the Capulets are out, and Tybalt walks up looking for Romeo, and Mercutio starts messing with Tybalt, and then Romeo walks up, and, that whole scene unfolds. By the end of it, two people are dead, and Romeo's in a lot of trouble. That's a pivotal scene in that play. This is the scene. Yeah, you may have thought it was the scene where they kill Caesar. That's actually not the pivotal scene, and I'll tell you why. It's the art of rhetoric, okay? So rhetoric is this really cool thing. You all use it, you just may not know what to call it, okay? I'm going to give you the official definition. Rhetoric is the skillful use of language in order to move or persuade. So the skillful use of language in order to move or persuade. We use rhetoric all the time. We will repeat ourselves. We'll repeat an important thought. Sometimes we use parallel ideas. Sometimes we'll say something and we'll say it with sarcasm. Our tone, we will not be actually meaning the words we say. It's our tone that gives it its meaning. All of these are used in rhetoric whenever we're trying to persuade with our words. And man, rhetoric back in this era was the thing that people had to be good at. Actually, Shakespeare is giving a little bit of a tip of the hat. Now, Shakespeare is a person whose words are incredible. His words have been written down for all time. His words have been kept because his words are beautiful, right? Well, in this play, he really explores the art of rhetoric, which back to the ancient Greeks and Romans, the art of rhetoric was a big deal. If you think back to whenever you've maybe studied the philosophers of ancient Greece, they would have their ideas, their theories, and they would be out in the public street, and they would be discussing their ideas and theories, their philosophies on why things work the way they do. Maybe they'd have a question about what is good. And then they would have debates and they would argue, and one person would speak for a bit, maybe another person would come in with a different idea. It was all the art of rhetoric. How do we talk people into things using simply our words? Humans for a long time have taken like clubs and sticks and like hurt people and made them do things with violence. The art of rhetoric is convincing people to do things with your words, with your thoughts, with your ideas. This is an important human ability. We all need to be a bit skilled in the art of rhetoric, and probably many of you actually are. And if you can think of like times whenever maybe you're trying to convince mom or dad of something, maybe times you're trying to convince your friends to do something, we use this skill. Some of us are better at it than others. So this is an important thought, and we're going to see some really great speeches where they're using their words to convince people of something, okay? So we're going to start Scene 2 of Act 3 of Julius Caesar. This is on page 870, and we are out in the public, like basically in front of the Capitol. We're in the Forum outside where all of the people are, okay? And people in this scene are called plebeians. That just means like a common person in Rome. Somebody who's not necessarily nobly born, somebody who's just like a regular everyday guy, okay? So you're gonna see in your scene that you have plebeians in general are saying things. That's like all of the people. And then it'll say the first plebeian, the second plebeian. These are just common people that are kind of shouting things out. So as somebody's giving a speech and they pause, maybe somebody says something in response to them, and then they keep talking. So that is what's happening in this scene, okay? I'm gonna go ahead and get us started on Scene 2 of Act 3, page 870 in our textbook. Okay, Brutus walks up to the podium.
Then follow me and give me audience, friends. Cassius, go you into the other streets and part the numbers. Those that will hear me speak, let them stay here. Those that will follow Cassius, go with him. And public reason shall be rendered of Caesar's death. I will...
Oh, let me just pause that for just a second. Okay. Hang on. Just 1 second. Okay, so Brutus has actually just said that Cassius needs to go to a different street and talk, and Brutus is going to talk here. So they're kind of like dividing and conquering, and they're both going to convince people with their rhetoric, with their words, about what's happening. Okay, now I kind of just messed up my my thing here, so hopefully it'll get back to the right spot. Give me a second.
Brutus is ascended. Silence. Be patient till the last.
Okay, I kind of fast forward just a little bit. One of the plebeians said, I will hear Brutus speak. Another one said, well, I'll hear Cassius speak, and compared their reasons. And then when severally we hear them, render it. So they're kind of splitting up the Roman citizens, talking to each of them. And then the third plebeian says, ooh, the noble Brutus has gotten up to the podium. Let's listen. I like that plebeian. I love it whenever somebody is about to speak. The respectful thing to do is to listen. And hey, let's just be aware that polite society, whenever somebody is, if somebody is speaking, it is best for all of us if we kind of give them respect and we quiet ourselves. You can absolutely think things, maybe jot a note down or something and then ask a question later, but it's really respectful to listen to what they say. Okay, so listening is really an important part of rhetoric. We have to be able to listen. Okay, let's continue. Now this is Brutus's speech. Oh, one thing I want to mention here, if you look down at your page, Brutus's words are kind of across all of the page. What that means, if we don't really know, like he's not speaking in poetic verse, he's speaking in prose. He's speaking in regular, everyday speech. Usually in Shakespeare, servants speak in everyday speech. And the poetry is what the nobility use. So Brutus has actually brought his language down. Have you ever tried to explain something to like a 5-year-old? You're going to change the way you are saying things. You're going to use smaller words. You're going to maybe change your voice. Okay, so that wasn't, you're going to try to speak to the 5-year-old on his or her level, right? That's what Brutus is doing. He's speaking to the common people in common language. Let's see what he has to say.
Romans, countrymen and lovers, hear me for my cause, and be silent that you may hear. Believe me for mine honor, and have respect to mine honor that you may believe. Censure me in your wisdom, and awake your senses that you may the better judge. If there be any in this assembly, any dear friend of Caesar's, to him I say that Brutus' love to Caesar was no less than his. If then that friend demand why Brutus rose against Caesar, this is my answer. Not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. Had you rather Caesar were living and die all slaves, than that Caesar were dead to live all free men? As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he was fortunate, I rejoice at it. As he was valiant, I honor him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him. There is tears for his love, joy for his fortune, honor for his valor, and death for his ambition. Who is here so base that would be a bondman? If any, speak, for him have I offended. Who is here so rude that would not be a Roman? If any, speak, for him have I offended. Who is here so vile that will not love his country? If any, speak, for him have I offended.
Okay, let's break this down a little bit, okay? So first of all, he addresses them, Romans, countrymen, and lovers. Hear me for my cause, And be silent so you can hear. Okay, it's a crowd of people. I mean, oh my gosh, it's hard to get people to be quiet, right? Sometimes we struggle in the classroom, right? Like sometimes it's hard to get 20 people to be quiet. Think of hundreds, thousands of people trying to get quiet. So he talks about how he was a friend of Caesar. He loved Caesar. He says, in fact, not that I loved Caesar less, but that I loved Rome more. So he's comparing his love of Caesar and his love of Rome and saying, "Ooh, I love the country so much more than I love just this one man." So like me killing him is not a big deal because I love my country more. Then he goes into this he talks about, would you rather Caesar be alive, but then you get to be a slave? Or would you rather that Caesar's dead and now you get to be free? It's either or reasoning. Actually, that's a logical fallacy. It means it doesn't make sense. We talk about logical fallacies occasionally. Remember, I've asked you the question, like, do you remember whenever you were a little kid, you're climbing a tree, and mom says, "Get down out of that tree or you're going to break your arm." That's a logical fallacy. That's either or reasoning. That's completely illogical. Actually, you could fall out of the tree and break your leg. You could fall out of the tree and break your neck. You could fall out of the tree and not break anything. You could not fall out of the tree. There are so many possibilities. This whole idea of either it's this or it's that is ignorant. So you can't say if Caesar lives, you're a slave. They weren't slaves. They in fact loved Caesar. That's a logical fallacy. Now that he's dead, you can be free. I mean, we'll see. Then he does this really nice parallel set. He says, "As Caesar loved me, I weep for him. As he was fortunate, I rejoice at how fortunate he was. As he was valiant, he was so brave, he was so courageous, I honor him. But as he was ambitious, I slew him." So all of these good qualities, and he keeps doing all these good things, and then he has a bad quality, and he does this good thing, he's saying, to get rid of that bad quality. It's interesting. He says, who here is so low that you'd want to be a slave? You'd want to be a bondman. Who among you wants to be a slave? That's stupid. And they're probably thinking, well, no, I do not want to be a slave. That's true. That's true, Brutus. I don't want to be a slave. He says, well, if anybody wants to be a slave, probably I've offended that guy. So any of you out there, raise your hand if you want to be a slave. I'm sorry, I offended you. Oops. But of course, nobody's raising their hand because who wants to be a slave? That's not a thing. He says, if any is so rude that you don't think of yourself as a Roman, then probably I've offended that person. Because if you're a Roman, if you consider yourself a proud Roman citizen, well, I've not offended you. Who here is so vile that you don't love your country? If that's you, I've probably offended you. And they're all like, oh, no, I love my country so much. I love my country. So he's saying, if you're offended, you either want to be a slave, you're not a Roman, or you don't love your country. Have you ever seen people use this in real life? If you're a proud American, you believe in XYZ, insert whatever you've heard. Do people use this type of reasoning? For sure. It kind of creates a bit of guilt, like, oh no, well, I do too love my country, so I guess I better love whatever they're saying. It is a type of rhetoric. Okay, so let's see what the people say.
I pause for a reply.
None, Brutus, no!
Then none have I offended. I have done no more to Caesar than you shall do to Brutus. The question of his death is enrolled in the Capitol. His glory not extenuated, wherein he was worthy, nor his offences enforced, for which he suffered death.
Mark Antony comes in with Caesar's
Here comes his body, mourned by Mark Antony, who, though he had no hand in his death, shall receive the benefit of his dying, a place in the commonwealth, as which of you shall not? With this I depart, that as I slew my best lover for the good of Rome, I have the same dagger for myself when it shall please my country to need my death.
Bring him with triumph home into his house.
Give him a statue with his ancestors.
Let him be Caesar.
Caesar's better parts shall be crowned in Brutus.
We'll bring him to his house with shouts and clamor.
My countrymen!
Peace! Silence! Brutus speaks.
Peace. Oh,
Good countrymen! Let me depart alone, and for my sake stay here with Antony. Do grace to Caesar's corpse, and grace his speech, tending to Caesar's glories, which Mark Antony, by our permission, is allowed to make. I do entreat you, not a man depart, save I alone, till Antony have spoken.
Okay, so Brutus pauses at the end of his speech, and he's like, I pause for reply. Is there anybody who wants to come at me now that I've explained myself, why I killed Caesar? And they're all like, none, Brutus, none. And then he says, so understand, this is why we killed him. This is why he had to die. And then as Mark Antony brings Caesar's body in, Brutus acknowledges him and says, hey, here's Mark Antony. He had no part in Caesar's death, but we're letting him, bring him in here. And then he says, with this I depart, that as I slew my best lover for the good of Rome, I have the same dagger for myself when it shall please my country to need my death. So if you don't agree with me having killed Caesar, like, my dagger is ready, and I can do this to myself if you feel like I didn't do Rome a favor. But the whole reason we did this was because we were trying to help the country of Rome. And all of the crowd, they're like, live, Brutus, don't die, live, we love you. Oh my gosh, we're such great fans of yours. Brutus, you're awesome. And they're saying, man, you're better than Caesar. You're greater than Caesar. You're Caesar's best part. Those who might think that he's Caesar's son. And so they're all like, yeah, we support you, Brutus. And then he says, all right, good, thanks, fans. Woo, all right. He says, now listen to Mark Antony, be respectful. He's going to say some kind words about Caesar, his death and all. So just give him your attention. And then Brutus leaves. Brutus doesn't stick around to listen. He just leaves.
stay. Oh, let us hear Mark Antony.
Let him go up into the public chair.
For Brutus' sake, I am beholding to you.
What does he say of
He
Brutus?
says for Brutus' sake he finds himself beholding to us all.
Twere best he speak no harm of Brutus here.
This Caesar was a tyrant.
Nay, that's certain. We are blessed that Rome is rid of him.
Peace. Let us hear what Antony can say.
You gentle Roman.
Okay. So everybody is like, yeah, Caesar needed to die. We support Brutus. There's even a point where Antony says, for Brutus' sake, I am beholding to you. I am indebted to you. So they're like, oh, good, he's talking nicely about Brutus because we are fans of Brutus. He better not say bad things about Brutus, is what these people are thinking. Now, let's see how Mark Antony's speech goes. Remember, we know what Mark Antony is actually thinking. But this is a crowd that is firmly behind Brutus and the conspirators. They've been talked into it. Like Brutus got out there. Brutus had some pretty sweet rhetorical skills. Brutus was like, hey guys, here's why we killed him. Either or reasoning. If Caesar lives, you're a slave. You don't want to be a slave. That'd be terrible. And then he says like, it's kind of guilt tripping. Like, hey, if you don't agree with us, like you are not a good Roman. You don't love your country. So he's saying all of these kind of loaded ideas and accusations for if somebody isn't with Brutus. We have to think about the concept of mob mentality. We'll be talking about that more by the end of this scene, and definitely in scene 3. But this idea that sometimes whenever we are with a lot of people, we get manipulated into doing things maybe we wouldn't normally do. Okay, so we're going to talk about that, but first we're going to hear Antony's speech. I'm going to let it go all the way through the speech, then we're going to talk about it.
Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it was a grievous fault, and grievously hath Caesar answered it. Here, under leave of Brutus and the rest, for Brutus is an honorable man, so are they all honorable men. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me, but Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. He hath brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? When that the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff, yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. You all did see that on the Lupercal I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and sure he is an honorable man. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? O judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me. My heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me.
Okay. This is one of the coolest speeches of all time. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. I don't know if you caught on to the way that whole situation shifted, but oh my goodness, they're like, yeah, Brutus is awesome. Caesar needs to die for sure. And then by the end of it, Caesar's dead. Oh no. Let's look at the speech. So he starts out really nicely. Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears. I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. Man, I'm here just to bury the guy. I'm not here to talk about how great he was, because we know he's not great. We just heard that, not great. So definitely not. I'm not here to praise him. I'm not here to praise Caesar. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is oft interred with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often buried with their bones. So let it be with Caesar. Now listen, if you're listening to that, you might be like, yeah, but hang on, what did he just say? That the evil that we do lives after us, but the good that we did is buried with us. Wait a second, guys, that doesn't sound like something we want to do. I would like whenever I die that maybe people occasionally remember a good thing that I did. I don't know, what do you think? So, that doesn't seem quite right. Huh. The noble Brutus. Brutus is so noble, isn't he? The noble Brutus hath told you Caesar was ambitious. If it were so, it were a grievous fault. And grievously hath Caesar answered it. Did you hear the size of that if? I mean, he just questioned the entire argument. The whole argument is Caesar was ambitious, he had to die. Mark Antony just said, if he was ambitious. Man, I mean, that is a pretty big shot that was just fired. And probably with some of the plebeians, the Roman citizens, they're probably like, if? I mean, Brutus was just talking about how ambitious he was. I mean, like, they killed him. Like, he must have been super duper ambitious. Like, for sure. Like, he had to be, right? Like, right? He was probably ambitious. Like, if? Mark Antony, buddy. But if he were, it was a grievous fault. And he paid for it with his life. He says, here under the leave of Brutus and the rest, they're letting me say these words to you. Ah, they're so good. They're so kind. He says, for Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable men. Every last one of them, guys, they are all honorable. I think you're using that word wrong. Yeah, probably. He does not mean it the way he's saying it. Come I to speak in Caesar's funeral. He was my friend, faithful and just to me. But Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. He, Caesar, hath brought many captives home to Rome. So he brought all these people home. He brought all these, new slaves and workers and things home. Brought many captives home to Rome, whose ransoms did the general coffers fill. Oh my gosh, Rome is so much richer because of what Caesar did. Wow, he gave so much to Rome. Did this in Caesar seem ambitious? I mean, shouldn't he have pocketed a lot of that cash instead of giving it to the country of Rome? Because if you're ambitious, that's what you do. So did this in Caesar seem ambitious? When that the poor have cried, Caesar hath wept. True, Caesar really cared deeply for the poor people. The poor people loved Caesar. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. If Caesar's ambitious, this is sad and pathetic, guys. He is so weird and pathetic. Weak. Ambition should be made of sterner stuff. Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. You all did see on that Lupercal, I thrice presented him a kingly crown, which he did thrice refuse. Was this ambition? You remember that scene where Mark Antony is handing him putting the crown on his head, and Caesar's like, no. Was that ambition? Yet Brutus says he was ambitious, and sure, he is an honorable man. At this point, Mark Antony's voice has probably changed to kind of how mine is. I speak not to disprove what Brutus spoke, I'm not trying to argue with him, but here I am to speak what I do know. You all did love him once, not without cause. You loved him for a reason. What cause withholds you then to mourn for him? Can't we even mourn over the man who just died? O judgment, thou art fled to brutish beasts, and men have lost their reason. Bear with me, my heart is in the coffin there with Caesar, and I must pause till it come back to me. Mark Antony is magical in this speech. He repeatedly talks about the nobility of Brutus, the honor of Brutus. Brutus is an honorable man. Whenever you repeat things, man, they just kind of sink in, don't they? And especially if you're repeating something, but maybe your tone is shifting as you're going. Brutus is an honorable man, but Brutus is an honorable man. So are they all honorable men. But Brutus is an honorable man. But Brutus is an honorable man. You see how it shifts every single time that he's saying it. So that by the end, whenever he says it that last time, they're all hearing, Brutus is not honorable. He's not honorable. Brutus is not an honorable man, guys. I'm hearing that Brutus is not an honorable man. That's what Mark Antony is saying. But he hasn't said one wrong thing. Not one. Everything is about tone in this speech. Everything is about using his words, using his phrasing, using that power of rhetoric to persuade. Okay, so we're going to pause here because we have to do like the rest of this scene. And we had a lot to talk about there with Mark Antony's speech. So in the next part, we're going to see what is the reaction of the people. What is the effect that the speech had on the Roman people?